I found the note in the pocket of her coat when I was transferring laundry from the washer to the dryer. It wasn't long, wasn't dramatic, just a hotel room number and a time scribbled next to the words, Arizona Salsa Festival. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing she'd been planning this for months, that the clues had been scattered everywhere, and I'd just been too blind to see them. They called me Eric. 45 years I'd lived, 20 of which had been with Louise. She was supposed to be my endpoint, my certainty, the place where I could drop the mask of a mall security guard and just be her husband. The man she chose. The man she promised to grow old with. And she'd met Kent on the street near Phoenix Civic Plaza. The pain of knowing hit me hardest in the mornings when I'd hear her in the shower, humming softly under the running water. Lately it had been fragments of songs I didn't recognize. Louise had always been a woman who knew what she wanted. A landscaper with her own small business, she planned every season, every upcoming client, like someone planning a military operation. Every detail mattered to her. Every deadline was sacred. Or so I thought. We lived in Dobson Ranch in Mesa, a 3-story house in a neighborhood where few people cared about their neighbor's business. Our kids, Larry and Monica, had grown up almost invisibly. Larry, my son, was 17 now, and he was more interested in his iPhone and hockey tournaments than conversations with his father. Monica, my daughter, at 14 already knew she wanted her own space, her own world that didn't include aging parents. Louise worked more than I noticed. She was always after work, doing something with clients, talking about irrigation systems, about new landscaping projects. It seemed natural to me that she was developing her business. But I didn't notice the details. Didn't notice how she started acting somehow different at home, not cold, not distant, but rather vague. Or maybe what I didn't notice was how she started criticizing me over small things. Eric, why don't you try something new? You're always in that same gray security uniform. You know, other men do something for themselves. Go to the gym, learn something interesting. You just sit on the couch after work. Not everyone is so boring. The criticism wasn't overt, it was like rain that you don't pay attention to for the first few days, and then suddenly you realize you're completely soaked. It seeps into your skin slowly, changing you from the inside out before you even know it's happening. I started questioning myself. Was I really that boring? Was I really that predictable? The uniform became a symbol of everything she found lacking in me, the gray fabric a metaphor for my gray existence. I was a security guard at Stone Creek Mall. Average salary, average job, nothing dramatic. I was 49 years old. I'd never aspired to great things. I aspired for my kids to grow up healthy, for Louise to be happy, for our home to remain a home and not just an address where we slept. I wanted the simple things. Sunday morning pancakes, family movie nights, the sound of my kids' laughter echoing through the house. I wanted to be the kind of father who showed up, the kind of husband who was reliable. But that was before. December 2024. I noticed how she found strange reasons for trips to Phoenix. New landscaping design exhibition, meeting with a potential client about a big project, need to buy special equipment for the business. Each excuse was carefully crafted, detailed enough to sound legitimate but vague enough to avoid scrutiny. Mesa and Phoenix are separated by about 30 kilometers. The drive takes half an hour around 10 a.m. and a bit more in the evening when traffic is thicker. For Louise, it was like a separate reality. She'd been going there every weekend for the last 6 months, sometimes with an overnight stay. Sometimes she'd leave Friday afternoon and not return until Sunday evening, claiming the workshops ran late or the networking events were essential for her business. I didn't do the math. Didn't want to. Because doing the math meant acknowledging what I already knew deep down but was too terrified to face. His name was Kent. A professional dancer who taught salsa and bachata at a studio on Central Avenue in Phoenix. Louise had met him a year and a half ago when he was performing a street performance among the shops in downtown Mesa. She'd stopped to watch, they'd talked, he'd invited her to a free trial class. 1 class turned into 2. 2 turned into regular weekly sessions. And somewhere along the way the dance lessons turned into something else entirely. Only the lessons lasted much longer than I'd imagined. I found out about it in December when I discovered her medical records while looking through documents for insurance. New prescriptions for birth control pills. She hadn't been taking them for 5 years, not since I'd had a vasectomy. There was no logic in going to a gynecologist and asking for new pills if your husband was sterile. Unless, of course, your husband wasn't the one you were sleeping with. Then I found the test results. My hands trembled as I read the neutral language of the documents, black letters on white paper. Tests for venereal diseases. 2 sets of results, from October and November. On the November one was a stamp, repeat examination. The clinical nature of the documents made it worse somehow. This wasn't a passionate mistake. This was calculated. Planned. She was protecting herself, being responsible about her affair in a way that made my stomach turn. I sat in our kitchen, the kitchen Louise herself had redesigned 3 years ago, in this beautiful gray kitchen with white facades that she loved so much, and I felt my heart literally tear into pieces with one thought. My wife is cheating on me. The granite countertops she'd chosen, the pendant lights she'd insisted on, the backsplash we'd installed together one weekend, all of it suddenly felt like a lie. Every memory in this space was contaminated now. Not thought. No. I didn't say anything to her for 3 days. 3 days I went through the motions at work, smiled at Walmart shoppers, helped old ladies with their bags, and the whole time I was dead inside. Absolutely, completely dead. I'd watch couples shopping together and wonder if they were hiding secrets too. I'd see teenagers holding hands and think about how naive they were to believe love lasted. The mall became a theater where everyone was performing their happiness, and I was the only one who could see through the act. Every interaction felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. I'd hear myself speak and wonder who that person was. The Eric who made small talk with coworkers. The Eric who reminded teenagers not to skateboard in the parking lot. The Eric who went home every night and sat across the dinner table from his wife and pretended everything was normal. Then one evening Louise decided we needed to talk about our future. She chose the living room. Night. Larry was at his friend's place, Monica was asleep. She sat on the couch in the same position she'd choose when she wanted to be serious. Back straight, hands folded on her knees. That posture alone made my chest tighten. I knew this position. It was her important conversation pose. Eric, I need to tell you something, she began, and I already knew this was going to be bad. Her voice had that careful quality, like she was picking her way through a minefield of words. I let her speak. Didn't interrupt, didn't argue. Just listened. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached, but I remained silent. She told me about how she felt lost. About how after the birth of the children something changed. About how she thought she'd disappeared, and suddenly she had the opportunity to learn dance. Something that had always been limited to her childhood dreams. About how she feels alive when she dances. She talked about finding herself again, about reclaiming a part of her identity that had been buried under diapers and parent-teacher conferences and landscaping contracts. She didn't say a single word about Kent. I love you, Eric, she finished, and that was the worst lie of all I'd ever heard. Not because I didn't believe she'd once loved me, but because those words felt like a consolation prize. Like she was trying to soften a blow that was already fatal. I stood up. I know about Kent, I said. Louise's face changed and I saw her fall apart, not from shame, but from the fact that her invented explanation no longer worked. She said, Eric, it's not what you think, and it was a classic lie like in the movies. What people say when they have nothing else to say. The script every cheater follows when they're caught. But that's not what I heard. What I heard was that she didn't ask me how I found out. Didn't ask how I was feeling. She asked, who told you? And that was the biggest insult. After everything, her first concern was about who had exposed her, not about the pain she'd caused. Not about our marriage. Not about our family. Just who had ruined her carefully constructed double life. I showed her the medical records. She tried to explain, said she wanted to be sure she was healthy, that these were just routine tests, that nothing happened. But we both knew it was a lie. A woman doesn't get new contraceptives if she's not planning to do something that might have consequences. The logic was inescapable. Louise cried. Not beautifully, like in movies. She cried the way people cry who've been dead inside for a very long time and suddenly all their feelings returned at once. It was ugly crying. Gasping, choking sobs that shook her entire body. Snot and tears and mascara running down her face. Real grief looks nothing like Hollywood grief. I don't love him, she said at some point. Her voice was raw, broken. I asked, then why did you need this? She couldn't answer me. Not because she didn't want to, she simply had no words. She sat on that same couch and repeated, I don't know, like a broken record. Like a stuttering cripple who'd lost the ability to form coherent thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. I left the house. Drove to my sister Krista's, who lived on the other side of Mesa. She was the only person who could withstand my anger that night without judging me. I showed up at her door at midnight and she took one look at my face and knew. She didn't ask questions. Just pulled me inside, poured me a whiskey I didn't drink, and let me sit in her spare bedroom staring at the wall until sunrise. Krista had known Louise for about 20 years. She took my side, but not because I was her brother. She understood that this wasn't about one mistake, but a series of deliberate, calculated decisions. Louise hadn't fallen into Kent's bed in one moment of weakness. She'd planned it. She took lessons, she drove to Phoenix, she took tests, she took pills. Each step was a choice. Each lie was intentional. "This doesn't mean it's all over," Krista said the next morning over coffee. I looked at her like she was crazy. "Eric, you've been together 20 years. 20 years. You have children who love you both. You have a home, memories, everything you built together." She sat down next to me on her couch. "I'm not saying you should forgive her. I'm saying forgiveness is a more complicated thing than you think. Sometimes it's not about what someone deserves, but about what you can live with. But I deserved my anger. Deserved my pain. And I was, God help me, deserving of forgiveness in no smallest sense. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Only then came what must come to every person who loves someone, the realization that you find yourself unable to hate someone you loved. Love doesn't just evaporate because someone betrays you. It sits there wounded and bleeding but still alive. Still demanding to be acknowledged. I returned home 2 days later. Louise was sitting in the kitchen. She hadn't slept, it was obvious. Red eyes, disheveled hair. She looked like a woman who'd been shattered. There was a coffee cup in front of her, cold and untouched. The morning sun coming through the window made her look older, frilier. "I ended it with him," were the first words she said. "When?" I asked. My voice was flat, emotionless. "I couldn't afford to feel anything yet. Right after you left. I called him, told him everything. I didn't believe her. I thought she was telling me what I wanted to hear. But then she showed me their text exchange, how she wrote, 'I'm so sorry, but this has to end. My family is more important.' The timestamp showed it was sent 2 hours after I'd walked out. He tried to convince her. Wrote about how they were building towards something great, how they were truly meant for each other. The texts were pathetic, desperate. He'd written paragraphs about their connection, their chemistry, how alive he made her feel. She responded with one phrase, 'My choice is my family.' And then she blocked him. I sat and looked at that correspondence and I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to believe her. Another part said she could unblock him at any moment. Digital barriers were so easy to remove. One click and he'd be back in her life. "What do we do now?" I asked Louise. She looked at me with empty eyes. "I don't know," she said. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me." Her voice cracked on the word forgive. I didn't know either. We went to a therapist. Family therapy, which I never thought I'd need. The guy's name was Brandon, and he considered it his job to listen to people talk about the worst moments of their lives without telling them they were terrible people. His office was generic. Beige walls, comfortable chairs, a box of tissues on every surface. The kind of place designed to absorb trauma. The first session was torturous. I sat as far away from Louise as possible, and I recounted to Brandon what happened, without emotion, as if I were reporting an incident at the mall. Louise cried most of the time. Brandon listened, took notes, asked careful questions that forced us to confront uncomfortable truths. "This won't be fixed in 1 month," Brandon said, and I knew he was right. Trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy. Rebuilding it? That's the work of a lifetime. But we started trying. The spring of 2025 brought the strangest period of my life. Louise stopped working. She quietly closed down her business, told her clients about the need for a break. I did what I always did. Went to work, came home, tried to be a normal person in front of my children. The performance of normalcy was exhausting. Every smile felt fake. Every, "How was your day?" felt like a lie. Larry didn't understand why his parents were acting strange. Monica knew something was wrong, but she didn't ask. We decided not to tell them the truth, not until they were old enough to understand it. How do you tell your children that one parent betrayed the other? How do you explain adult failures to teenagers who still believe in fairy tales? At one of Brandon's sessions, I talked about how I was feeling. "I love her," I said, "but I also hate her. And it's a strange place to be." The contradiction was killing me. How could I feel both things simultaneously? How could I want to hold her and push her away in the same breath? Brandon asked, "What do you love about her?" I thought about it. Then I started talking about how Louise would laugh at me when I made stupid jokes in the kitchen. About how she always knew when I was upset, even if I didn't say anything. About how she'd wake me up in the morning with a cup of coffee, because she knew I loved coffee more than I loved sleep. About the way she'd touch the small of my back when passing behind me. About how she'd defended me to her mother when we first got married. About 1,000 tiny moments that made up 20 years of marriage. And when does all this start to make sense? I asked. When you try to see the whole picture, Brandon responded. Not just the moments of pain. A marriage isn't one betrayal. It's not even 1 year or 5 years. It's thousands of moments, good and bad, and you get to decide which ones define it. Louise said something I never thought I'd hear. I was stupid, she said when we returned home that day. Her voice was small, childlike. I'm really stupid. I threw away 20 years for something that lasted 8 months. 8 months. When she said the number out loud, it sounded so small. So insignificant. 8 months compared to 2 decades. I didn't know what to say to her. It's not your fault that I turned out to be an inadequate partner, she continued. You paid the least attention to me, but I chose to do this in the worst possible way instead of telling you I was unhappy. She was taking responsibility finally. Not making excuses. Not blaming me for her choices. Spring brought changes. It was Valentine's Day, February 14th. I know it sounds like a movie, but it really happened. Louise asked me to go with her to a dance class. I looked at her like she was insane. After everything, she wanted to dance? The activity that had destroyed our marriage? But something in her eyes made me say yes. The dance studio wasn't where Kent taught. It was a different studio with a different instructor, an older woman who'd been teaching bachata for 30 years. Her name was Gloria, and she had the patience of a saint. And she taught me to dance. It wasn't what I expected. I was stiff, awkward, like a board without flexibility. My feet felt like cement blocks. I stepped on Louise's toes 3 times in the first 10 minutes. But the instructor just laughed and said everyone was like that at first. She showed me the basic steps, counted out the rhythm, moved my arms into the correct position. Louise watched me with the saddest smile I'd ever seen. I didn't understand why she was crying when I made mistakes. Only later did I understand these were tears of relief, that I'd turned out to be willing to even try something that I'd previously dismissed as not for me. I was meeting her halfway. Finally. We went to that class every Thursday evening for the next 3 months. Slowly, impossibly, I started to get better. My body learned the rhythms. I stopped thinking about the steps and started feeling them. And when Louise and I danced together, moving in sync to music that had once represented everything wrong in our marriage, something shifted. The dance became ours, not theirs. We were reclaiming it. By July, we were in a place I'd call acceptable. Not happiness. I clearly knew happiness would take more time. But we started laughing again, sometimes together. Louise returned to work, taking on smaller projects at first. I joined a gym not because she'd criticized me but because I understood she'd been right. I really wasn't doing anything for myself. I'd let myself become comfortable, complacent. Not just in my body but in every aspect of my life. Kent no longer appeared in our lives. I don't know what happened to him. Don't want to know. Louise said she'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to California, teaching dance at some studio in Los Angeles. Good riddance. Larry asked me one day, "Why were you and Mom being weird before?" I said, "People sometimes misunderstand each other. But we fixed it." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was the truth he needed at 17. Monica didn't ask. I think she understood more than I thought she did. Teenage girls have a sixth sense for relationship drama. One day she hugged Louise extra tight after dinner, and I knew she'd figured something out, even if she didn't have all the details. There are still days when I look at Louise and I'm gripped by coldness. Days when I think about what could have happened if I'd seen it earlier. Days when I'm not sure if this is really forgiveness or just an agreement between two people who understood that losing everything was a worse option. Days when I wake up in the middle of the night and watch her sleep and wonder if she dreams about him. But there are also days when we dance in the kitchen to music she plays, and I forget all the pain. Days when she listens to me, really listens, and I understand she's returned to valuing what she had. Days when I catch her looking at me the way she did when we first met, and I remember why I fell in love with her in the first place. Brandon says it's a natural process. That trust requires not forgiveness on the first day, but a daily choice to be with someone who disappointed you. It's waking up every morning and choosing to stay. It's seeing them across the breakfast table and deciding they're worth the effort. It's work. Constant, exhausting, painful work. I chose to be with Louise. Not because I forgot what happened. Not because it was easy or fair. Not because I'm weak or desperate or unable to be alone. But because people are more complicated than I ever thought they could be. Because love isn't just the good times, it's also the choice to stay through the bad. Because my children deserve to see that relationships can survive mistakes, that adults can work through problems instead of running away. And because it matters to me that she chose me in the end. Not Kent. Not the excitement and passion of something new. Me. The boring security guard with the gray uniform and the predictable life. She chose our history over his novelty. Our family over his fantasy. That has to count for something. The wedding ring on her finger catches the light sometimes, and I remember the day I put it there. 21 years ago now. I was 28, she was 26, and we thought we knew everything about love. We were so young. So stupid. So confident that our love would be easy. Nobody tells you that marriage is choosing the same person over and over again, even when you don't want to. Nobody tells you that love isn't a feeling, it's a decision you make every single day. Nobody tells you that forgiveness isn't a moment of clarity where all the pain disappears. It's a slow, grinding process of choosing not to let the past poison the present. Brandon asked me in our last session if I'd truly forgiven Louise. I thought about it for a long time. I don't know, I finally said. I don't know if I ever will completely. But I know I want to try. And maybe that's enough. He smiled. Maybe it is. We still go to therapy once a month. Maintenance, Brandon calls it. A tune-up for the marriage. We sit on his beige couch and talk about our week, about small resentments and tiny victories, about the daily work of choosing each other. Sometimes Louise cries. Sometimes I do. Sometimes we leave holding hands, and sometimes we drive home in separate cars because we need space. But we keep going. We keep trying. Because the alternative, giving up, feels like admitting that 20 years meant nothing. That our children's childhood home should be divided between two addresses. That the love we built was so fragile it couldn't survive one betrayal. I look at Larry now, 17 and preparing for college, and I think about what we're teaching him about relationships. I look at Monica, 14 and starting to date, and I wonder what messages she's absorbing about love and trust and forgiveness. I want them to know that relationships are hard. That people make mistakes. But also that those mistakes don't have to be the end of the story. Last week, Louise and I celebrated our 21st anniversary. Nothing fancy, dinner at the same Italian restaurant where I proposed all those years ago. The same red vinyl booths, the same pasta that's too heavy, the same cheap wine. But it felt different this time. Like we'd fought our way back to each other through fire and come out scarred but alive. She reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you, she said. For what? For staying. For trying. For not giving up on us. Her eyes filled with tears. I know I didn't deserve it. I squeezed her hand. Maybe you didn't. But maybe I didn't deserve to throw away 20 years either. Maybe we both deserve a second chance. Do you still think about it? She asked. We rarely talked about Kent directly anymore, but sometimes the elephant in the room demanded acknowledgement. Every day, I said honestly. But less. Indifferently. At first, it was all I could think about. Now it's just part of our history. A bad chapter, but not the whole book. She nodded. I still hate myself for it sometimes. For what I put you through. What I put us through. Good, I said, and she looked surprised. You should. Not because I want you to suffer, but because it means you understand what you almost lost. What we almost lost. We finished our meal in comfortable silence. 21 years of marriage means you don't always need words. Sometimes the silence says everything. When we got home, Larry was gaming in his room and Monica was on a video call with her friends. The house was alive with the sounds of our children living their lives, blissfully unaware of how close they'd come to a divided home. Louise turned to me in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd confronted her about the medical records, and pulled out her phone. She found a song, something slow and romantic, and held out her hand. Dance with me? She asked. I took her hand. We swayed together in the dim kitchen light, and for those few minutes, everything else faded away. The betrayal, the pain, the months of therapy, the sleepless nights, all of it became background noise to this moment. This choice. This dance. I love you, she whispered against my shoulder. I know, I said. And I did. I believed her now in a way I hadn't been able to before. Not because the pain was gone, but because her actions over the past months had proven it. Love isn't just words. It's showing up every day even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The song ended, but we kept swaying, held in place by something stronger than music. Hope maybe. Or determination. Or just the stubborn refusal to let one mistake define 2 decades. We're going to be okay, Louise said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, I agreed. We are. And standing there in our kitchen holding my wife, listening to our children laugh in their rooms, I believed it. Not because it was easy. Not because the past was forgotten. But because we'd chosen this. Chosen each other. Chosen the hard work of rebuilding over the easier path of walking away. Brandon was right. Trust isn't rebuilt in a day. It's rebuilt in 1,000 small moments like this one. A dance in the kitchen. A hand held across a dinner table. A choice made every morning to stay, to try, to believe that people can change and relationships can heal. I don't know what our future holds. I can't promise there won't be more hard days. More moments of doubt and pain and wondering if we made the right choice. But I know that we're in this together. Fighting for us. And somehow that's enough. The kids will grow up and move out. Louise's business will flourish again. I might even retire from the mall eventually. Life will continue with all its complications and challenges. But we'll face it together. Not as two people who never struggled, but as two people who did and chose to stay anyway. That's what love is, I've learned. Not the absence of problems, but the commitment to work through them. Not perfect happiness, but the willingness to fight for imperfect joy. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it destroy the future. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.